Good morning, everybody. Olivia O'Connor here today to show you how to use a Flexcut Flexible Drawknife. We are a day later. If you tried to tune in yesterday, you'd know we had some really awful internet issues. So fingers crossed we can get through today in one piece and without my voice sounding like a distorted robot as it did yesterday. So before we get into it, and whilst hopefully a few more people join, those of you who've been following along on the woodblock carving we've been doing in previous live streams, I'll show you something I carved up recently. I've got a little wombats. This one was really, and there's the print, really simple, all just done with a V-gouge and a really shallow scoop just around here. So I cut the shape out on the bandsaw and then use a V-gouge to get all those lines. So very simple use of a V-gouge, but let's get into the draw knife today. So first things first, I use this little Flexcut Flexible Drawknife for a lot of my work. It's probably one of my most used tools. Let me come close to the computer for you. As you can see by how grubby these handles are compared to a relatively newer gouge. First things though I do when I get one of these, if I'm using it for myself, you'll notice that on a new one, the handles are sort of very flared at the ends here. I personally find that really uncomfortable. So I just use a little knife and I knock off the end there because I find you want it to sit in the center of the palm of your hand like that. And I find this design a little bit much and a little bit tough in my hands there. So I just take the edges off. You can see it's got really grubby because it's got no varnish on it. And I just find that much more comfortable to hold for a long amount of times. The other thing is after an amount of time, who knows how long it'll be, this handle I found in all my knives eventually will pop off. But to rectify that, it's really simple. So this metal piece has a shaft that comes down to about here. It's got a hole in it. Once it pulls out, you measure how far down that hole is. And like on this side here, you just put a screw through, grind it off on the back, and then your handle is nice and secure. And in all honesty, it usually comes off when I'm doing a demonstration with a new knife. So let's hope that doesn't happen today. Let's hope the internet is working. If anybody out there wants to say hello, that'd be lovely. If you've got questions as we go along, please pop them in the chat. Hi Simone, I'm so glad you tuned back in. I'm glad the sound is better. I don't know what was going on yesterday. It was awful, wasn't it? It was very, very windy yesterday. So I think that sort of blew the internet away, if that's how the internet works. But let's hope today will be better. I can just hear the wind is picking up. So let's hope we have better results today. But I'm going to get straight into showing you how to use your little flexible draw knife. So most draw knives that you'll come across, your blade is going to be about probably this long and a lot thicker and a lot more rigid. This is called a flexible knife because, as you can see, I can flex that. And it's got a lot of bounce and a lot of give in that. And I think the biggest mistake people use when they first pick up one of these little tools is they try and use it as a rigid knife. You actually have to flex it slightly to get the best out of the tool. So I'll show you how we go. So to practice, I've just got a piece of hoop pine, grain running like this. Good morning. Thank you. More people tuning in. I hope today goes better as well. I'm having, the computer's a little further away than normal, so I'm having a hard time reading the comments because it's in very small font. But if you, just as we go along, you pop questions in and I will come up and sort of answer them in little batches once we get a few pop up there. So I've got a piece of, this is just hoop pine. You can use whatever. Really just experiment, see which timber's going to work well. Straight grain. So most draw knives you sort of want to pull across like this. With the flexible draw knife, I'm going to flex it like that. You can see I'm just getting a bit of bounce and bend in that. I'm not That's the back of my tool. I'm not resting the back hard down. I'm tilting slightly upward. So rest it hard down, tilt slightly up. You'll just get a feel for the right angles to use. And then I'm flexing and I'm pulling through. So hitting things with my other hand. Give me a second. I'm going to put that in the vise and close the vise properly. That'll help. That won't be bouncing around. Isn't that better? As I'm cutting, now I'm going to do a really exaggerated cut to prove the point. And it is the same as when we're working with a carving gouge when we kind of want to sweep through. I'm going to start my cut at one end of my blade and finish at the other. That means, and if I come at this sort of an angle rather than this, see, kind of like almost 45 degrees to that grain, applying a bit of flex. And as you can see, we are getting lovely, lovely spirals. Now, spirals mean you're cutting really, really well. It means you're slicing through that grain instead of ripping through it. So once you're starting out with this tool, just practice. See, I'm hitting a bit here. That's because I stopped my previous cut early, so now the timber goes up. So to rectify that, I can just trim that end bit off. So just practice getting your cuts. You see, we're doing quite well. We've got a sharp tool, nice grain timber. I'm getting a bit of flex on that blade as I'm coming through. And you'll notice you do want a bit of, now I'm putting a bit of splintery wood up top here. You do want a bit of speed as you come through. If I come, this is me coming slow, see I'm grabbing at every point. So I might not be using the full length of that blade from side to side, but I am sort of probably covering about an inch of it as I'm slicing down. A few rough patches. Don't worry. So practice on a straight edge, nice straight grain piece of timber, but where this really comes into its own and where I use it most is I have here a rocking horse leg. So this tool's really good, and kind of other draw knives can be a bit clunky, to work your way around bends. You can see we've got a lot of bends and a lot of shape I want to work around. Here is the leg I carved and shaped yesterday, whilst I thought the live stream was working, but I was just talking into an empty computer. But you can see we've got a lot of curves, like internal curves, external curves, concave, convex. This line here is the grain direction, just so you can get an idea of that. This little knife, you can actually cut it, use it right against the grain, which can be really handy at times. And I'll show you else. This is something else I've been working on recently. This is will be a heron, a bird sculpture here. When this was a log, I roughed a lot of it out with the little draw knife as well to really kind of get up in through these shapes here. So let's get into the fun part. Now, I'm going to be talking a bit about grain direction. If you're finding that confusing, previous live stream I have done on grain direction. That's probably really useful to go and have a look back on just to catch up. But as such, because my grain is coming up here, and I want to shape this whole section here to start with. If I were, and I want to sort of remove all of that, excuse me, I want to remove all of that. If I were to start down here, I would then have to, in one sort of stroke, it would want to keep cutting the whole way through there, and that is far too much material for for the tool to cope with. So it's the wrong angle. So instead I'm going to just take the point off. So I'm probably taking about like 1 mil to 2 mils off at a time per stroke. I am flexing that ever so slightly. You'll get used to the flexing, and different situations are called for different flexing in different angles. There you can see I've hit a really tough part. So same as when we're carving with a V-tool, you can kind of like wiggle and nudge your way through. I see we've got more comments. I'm gonna, once we get a couple up, I'm gonna come forward and read them and answer them as a lot. So sorry I can't answer them as I'm going, but I'm gonna carve one side of a leg and then the other side. So hopefully my stuff will be answered for you. So I am flexing that tool. See, that's straight. That's how much I'm flexing. Just a real small amount for this sort of work here. And I think the thing is you want to work smartly. You don't want to rely on sort of muscle strength to get your way through. If you're doing that, you'll end up just like ripping your timber and getting tired yourself. Now I'm just rolling that blade up around the top. Where it's coming in here, I'm just going to let them all collect, all those baggy curls. I've hit a little bit of a tough bit of grain here, so I'm really exaggerating that sweeping action to sort of counteract that. Now I've got all of this waste here that still needs to come off, so I can pick that off. I'm also now going to turn the tool backwards. So I was working like this. Now I'm going to work like this. I've got the bevel side down. I'm still going to flex it. This time I'm flexing up instead of down like that. So I'm flexing up. And with a really, really exaggerated scooping cut, I'm going to remove these bits. Now, the reason I'm coming backwards here, because if you think the grain's coming up like that, this way I'm cutting the ends off. Here, I still want to be cutting the ends off. Go look at that video on grain direction, and I've got a really good little demo with a packet of bamboo skewers that kind of explains it a lot better than I'm doing right now. But really, I'm exaggerating that scoop. So you can see I'm still getting curls, but they are just, I need to cut them off. I'm just going to slice, really slice through like that. Come up here, this is my hoof. Really slicing down here, really exaggerating that scoop. I'm bending, you see that? That's a blade flat, that's how much I'm bending it. So I'm bending it quite a bit to come through here. Bevel side up, slice that off. So when I work with this little knife, as it's coming towards me, I like to have the bevel up. As it's going away from me, I like to have the bevel down. And definitely as I'm taking it away from myself, that's where I tend to use my shorter, more scoopy strokes. I'm going to really exaggerate the bend on the tool now to come around this short little, and I'm always more chipping away here. See here, where I'm sort of faltering here, I'm trying too hard to pull it up around into the next bend. So I need to listen to the timber there better than I was. Come back at it. And now one of the steepest curves we'll get. I'm going to come in here. I'm working down. So again, I'm cutting the ends off those pieces of grain, whereas if I was coming up like this, you can see I'm just getting stuck because it's trying to cut off full lengths, whereas this way it's cutting the ends off. Really this sort of an action, because this is quite a steep bend. So I'm actually not cutting strips of grained timber off. I'm just chopping a series of ends off as I come through here. I teach a lot of people to use these tools in when I run my rocking horse classes, and the people who don't try and use strength when operating them tend to get the best results. Because if you use strength, you end up fighting. And I can tell you, I'm not very strong. Let me just bring this close for you to have a better look at. You can see here we have worked our way around these bends. Question from Lauren. Have you cut that leg blank on the bandsaw first? Yes. I would say of the sort of plugged in power tools in my workshop, the bandsaw is the tool I use the most, and that has 100% been cut out on the bandsaw first. So if you imagine that's your back leg, you'd have the rump, head going up off there, that's the belly, and your front leg comes down here. But yeah, that's been cut out on the bandsaw. So you can see we are getting quite a bit of shape. Still quite faceted. I'm going to work this edge now. A lot of people, when they use draw knives, they'll sort of sit on a shaved horse where you sort of clamp it in with your feet. And so you're sitting down and pulling it straight towards you. I've always done it standing up. Do whatever's most comfortable for you. See, with my grain going this way, this whole strip here, I'm now cutting off those end fibres. Let's pull that up a little higher. I might just tilt this computer down a little so you can see a bit more of the bench. I hope that's a little better. So really, I'm also usually like to scoop down. I don't have the space here because I'm going to bash my knuckles, so I'm twisting up this time. I hope you can hear the sound of that timber cutting, because it's cutting really nicely. Now here again, I'm hitting where I'm leveling out and coming up. So I'll go backwards. See how bent that is? The amount of pressure is the hardest part to explain to people, and I think the only way you can learn how much pressure to apply is just a lot of trial and error. Really scooping that. Now you don't have to go out and carve your own singular or rocking horse legs. Of course, you can apply this to whatever you're doing. Like 3-dimensional obviously is better, but you will find it's a good way to remove a lot of waste quickly. I'm just showing you a rocking horse leg because I carve an awful lot of rocking horse legs, and it's got so many different in and out curves. I think it's kind of a handy shape to get used to working. So now I'm coming down away from myself, so I'm going to put that bevel side down. Get really tough grain here, so I'm really giving that lots of short cuts. I'm exaggerating the bend that I'm putting into that. My bevel side is facing down. Really trying to scoop in here. So you see, you can start to get quite a bit of shape. Now, something else that's cool I want to remove some of this area here. So I'm actually going to wrap the whole blade around. I'm getting a lot of bend on it now. There we go. And cut those baggy bits off. This is always quite a tight area to work. I don't have much space. The curve is quite exaggerated, so I'm really, really bending it this time. The light is shining on that like I've got the bevel side up, but I don't. The bevel side is definitely facing down into the timber here. So I'm really scooping that. Now to cut these off, really exaggerated slice. Now one of my favourite parts is knocking off little bits. So easy after all that really exaggerated scooping. Here I'm trying to take off too much, so you can see how much that was digging in. So if you're getting resistance, it usually means you're going the wrong way or you're trying to take off too much. Or your grain is too dense, too all over the place. Dense isn't the right word. So let me show you this. See, we are getting some shape. You can see that a tool that's often used for flat edges, it's really, really good at rounding out there. Side two. Again, I've got that long stretch. I'm not going to carve this area here because that's for later construction. I need that to be clear. But I am going to really and again, backwards. By the time I've done all four sides of this sleeve, you should be guessing what section's coming up next. Which way I'll be flipping the tool. You see, it is looking really messy at the moment, but I often use this in conjunction with a Saw Rasp and that'll clean it up. Got another question. I never thought to use a draw knife flexibly like that. To do a concave area like that, I would have used a spoke shave with a curved base. Yeah, I have tried using spoke shaves with curved bases. I find the little flexible draw knife far easier to control because you can sort of, with the spoke shave, you've kind of got to adjust the depth of the blade in the tool before you get going, whereas this, you can constantly adjust it yourself without fiddling around. It's just the angle and the pressure you put on. And like I've said several times already, you've got to apply some sort of a bend, I've found, for these tools to work properly. So even cutting on the straight, nice and easy like that, if I'm just holding it straight and loose like that, it's not going to work. I've got to get a little bit of flex in there for that to really cut properly. If I knew much more about anything to do with like metal strength and flexibility, it probably tensions it maybe or something. Someone will probably correct me and tell me. So here we're going backwards. that little bit of dark grain in there, giving it lots of little controlled cuts to get beyond that. And again, up here, should have remembered from the previous two sections, really bevel down, a lot of bent pressure. On that flat face, you've really got to exaggerate those cuts. Now, if anyone out there is watching and wondering what this is going to turn into, it's a rocking horse leg. You can see more examples of my rocking horses on my website, which is oliviaoconnor.com.au. That's a big bit. Or Facebook and Instagram, search for Olivia O'Connor Carving. And you can see a finished horse and say, oh my gosh, I know how the back legs are done. And actually, once you know how the back leg is done, you know how the front legs are done, you know how I shape the body, the whole lot, really. Roll this backwards. You can see we are getting a lovely collection of spirals, or mulch for the chickens is what we use it for. All these beautiful clean timber shavings. Again, bevel side up. It's taking off really thin layers. This really doesn't use much muscle at all. And it's a lot less effort to take off 5 thin layers than to try and do 1 layer, sort of 5 layers thick. Let me just tighten that up. If you don't have your work tightened in your vise enough, you will have issues. You really want, for this sort of thing, you really want everything to be really secure. You want a bench that's not going to wobble. I haven't mentioned this is Radiata Pine, so not your most beautiful, well-known timber for draw knifing, but you can see it does the job really well. It's really stable. Really trying to scoop in around that joint there. And again, this flat area, wrapping that blade really flatly. Rip all those curls off. Here, working around those tight joints, bevel side down. I'm really flexing that blade. Like I said before, this is a really good shape to practice on because you've got so many different curves, different radiuses. Nearly lost our grain line, it's going. If you haven't done so already, I'd really appreciate it if you could like this video. We'll keep them going then. Just really trying to round out through here. I'm nearly done with this. If you've seen other videos of mine, you'll know I really like the Saw Rasp as well. It's a rasp where it's sort of teeth are like interwoven hacksaw blades. And I nearly always pair that with this knife when I'm roughing out. a lot of people do use a draw knife for your finished result. I tend to use it to get a really rough shape and then come in with finer tools. Just find what works best for you. Okay, I'm going to show you this. I see we've got some more comments. Here you go now. Yes, it is flexible for a reason. I'm sure they called it that deliberately. It works really, really well. I really do suggest trying it out, especially if you have one. You can see we have got a lot of really scrappy bits here. Not the most even through here. If I wasn't if I had all the time in the world to spend on this by myself, I would even that up a little bit more, but for now we won't worry. But you can see we're really getting some rounded shape happening. I'm quite thick here and here though. So on this end view, that should be really coming in there. I'm going to quickly notch that back a little bit now to save effort. Working away from myself, downwards, so I've got bevel side down. I don't know if you can see, that's probably the most extreme, that's relaxed, that's the most extreme I've bent it. Now the other side. Go, just a little bit to take off. Now when I say I pair it with the Saw Rasp, this is a Saw Rasp. I've shown it to you guys before, but I'll show it again. You can see those. So that's on the outer side, that's the rough side, there's a fine side on top. You can't really see the teeth so well in this light, but it's like woven hacksaw blades, is the way I describe it. The teeth sort of run that way, so it cuts away from me. So I only need to apply pressure as I'm going away like that. Absolutely love it. It also, because it's light and airy, it's not too heavy and it doesn't really get very clogged up, which is brilliant. So all these jaggedy bits where we've got lots of sort of facets coming around to make a rounded shape. You'll see how I just use the Saw Rasp to remove those. So as I'm coming, because I know I want a rounded shape, I'm going to be twisting like this. I'm not just going to be going flat, flat, flat. I am getting a bit of a twist motion through. In this edge of this curve in here, I'm going to use just the edge of that rasp there. So really just cutting only a couple of strands in. If I was to come like this and try and work my way around, I would end up cutting channels the width of that into it. Not what I want to do. I'm working the corner. I always use the rough side. I very, very, very rarely use the fine side. It's something I do always say to people because I'm right-handed, so I'm going to power it with my right hand. Use my left hand here to stabilize it. Because that is still toothed, or teethed, it's got teeth. If you're not used to using it, you'll get quite rough, scratched up hands. So glove on your non-dominant hand is always a really good idea. And again, like everything else I've said, I'm not putting a lot of effort in. I'm just kind of letting the weight of the tool do a lot of the work for me. Right angle. I did my vice up properly. Yeah. So in here, again, I'm going to use the corner edge of that tool. And really twist that very edge to get into this little deep area. So these are definitely two of my most used hand tools, especially when I'm making rocking horses. Now here I'm coming quite lightly. I'm letting the tool, the weight of the tool work that for me. I will show you me really trying to push it, and you'll see how it kind of gets, see it's grabbing as I come through. So you actually don't want to force it. Remember that it cuts as you push away from yourself. So on the back glide, I'm not applying any pressure downward. I'm just letting it kind of like pull backwards to me. We have one side, you can see, whilst it does leave a rough texture, it is rounding out all these daggy bits in here. You round out this second side. Then you always hope that it matches the previous or the leg you're about to cut. Always important to keep readjusting the height of this rather than readjusting your body. But I did forget to mention when I was using the draw knife, I have my feet about shoulder width apart, maybe a little bit wider even, and I'm not planted on the spot. I'm moving around quite a lot. You want to be able to shift your weight constantly. Nice and tall. This is the action. This isn't the action. I see a lot of people trying to mount their work too low, so then they have to bend over to it and get to it, whereas mount it up high enough for yourself. Ideally, your work, especially if you're hand carving, should be about hip height, maybe even a little bit higher. And this, you see, it is all around about hip-ish height for me. One last little bit in here. Now to this rough side, you can go on and you can use the finer side of the tool. In some cases, I've actually used files and like metal, like a fine metal file to get a really smooth edge. If you want to keep removing timber before you progress to sandpaper, if you're going to be progressing to sandpaper. Or if you didn't want to progress to sandpaper, I'd probably say don't use this. Okay, let me show this to you. You can see we are getting a bit more rounded shape and definition. This isn't even, but I will fix that up my own self. Still want to remove a little bit of bulk through there, but that's all right. More questions from Simone. A friend showed me that if I was having problems with the vice hold of my work, I should spray or switch. I've heard that too from quite a few people, and I'm yet to trial it out, but a lot of people do it, so I bet it does work really, really well. Just little spritz of water, I've heard. There you go. How to use a little Flexcut Flexible Drawknife. You can see how much I use mine, but how grubby these handles are. Don't be daunted by, daunted's not the right word. Don't be put off by how little it is. You can still do a lot of work with it. I personally prefer it to larger draw knives. I find it quite nifty and nimble. All the different shapes it can come around in. Oh, thank you so much for that lovely comment, Simone. I hope you enjoyed this video. I'm so glad comments have been coming in consistently. It means it is working, unlike yesterday's. Let's hope next month we don't have any of the same issues and we can keep going. I'd really appreciate it if anybody out there watching could like this video, subscribe to the Carpet YouTube channel. You can follow me and my work. My website is oliviaoconnor.com.au and Instagram at Olivia O'Connor Carving, at Olivia O'Connor Carving. Nearly forgot my own handle there for a second. And Facebook is, just search for Olivia O'Connor Carving on Facebook. And you'll be able to see a picture of a finished rocking horse. So here, pair of legs from yesterday's failed live stream, from today's successful live stream. Thank you so much for watching, everybody. I hope you enjoy the rest of your weekends. And as always, if you're watching this after time when it's no longer live, please put any questions you have in the comment section and I will try and get back to those for you. Thank you very much, everyone. Bye.